And we're back. All right, let's talk about keywords. So, to get started, then the way that you're gonna want to structure your keywords is in each ad group. You're gonna want this structure. Again, this is a rough idea, but just start here if you don't have anywhere, if you don't know how else to start. So, you want to have one broad match that matches the idea of the campaign. So we'll show some examples here in a second, but then you want to have 3 to 5 phrase matches that match the idea very closely, and then 5 to 20, and really as many as you want exact matches that match the idea as well. So this is going to give you really good control, and also it's going to combine the best of control with phrase and exact match with the discovering new keywords that broad match will give you. Again, if this doesn't make sense to you, don't worry. I talk about this a lot more in depth in the rest of the course, but if you kind of know all these pieces, just start here. Or if you just like to have exactly, like a step-by-step plan, this is where to start every single time, and then you can adjust from here. So an example, one broad match that matches the idea. If the idea of the campaign, remember the campaign only has one central idea and then one geographical location, usually country. So a broad match that matches the idea. If the idea is bone broth recipes, not bone broth health benefits, not, bone broth at Walmart, where to buy bone broth. Not that. We're not talking about buying bone broth. We're talking about recipes. People who want recipes to make their own bone broth. That's one specific central idea. So the broad match should just be that idea, bone broth recipe. Now this is going to probably go out and find some things like where to buy bone broth, what are the risks of eating bone broth or whatever. The broad match will go find those things, but then you can start pulling out some things that it's going to find things that you wouldn't think of, and they're not in any keyword tools, etc. And you can just, if it finds things and you end up getting impressions and clicks for things that are not relevant, then you can just add them as negative keywords, which we'll talk about later. That's kind of an advanced thing. So an example of the 3 to 5 phrase matches that match the idea would be, and you again, we'll cover this more, but in other parts, but you create a phrase match by just putting quotes at the end of the phrase, or at the beginning and the end of the phrase. So it'd be bone broth recipe, recipe bone broth. People might search one way or the other. You could just put bone broth. That's going to get lots of different queries that just have the specific phrasing of bone and broth right in a row. And then make bone broth. And you could think of some other ones too, but 3 to 5 is a good place to start, and that'll start getting some real good results. And by the way, you don't need to do keyword research necessarily. If you just kind of think about the topic, and you can come up with these, at least the first set, on your own. You can do keyword research, and it's going to be like more informed, more lasered in, but you don't have to. You can just kind of like common sense your way into this. You just say bone broth recipes, and from there, what might somebody search for if they're looking for bone broth recipes? So here are some examples of things that I just came up with off the top of my head. Was bone broth recipes, recipe bone broth. You never know. People search for things in all sorts of different ways. How to make bone broth. That's slightly different, but that person is very, very likely to be interested in downloading a free recipe or getting a bone broth recipe cookbook, because they're right now on their computer or their phone looking for how to make bone broth. So it's very relevant to them. Bone broth recipes for weight loss. That'd be an example of a more specific exact match that you might be trying to target. Paleo bone broth recipes, because I know paleo and bone broth go together. Make bone broth, best bone broth recipe, easy bone broth recipe. Now, if you put these in exact match, then the search engine is always going to check exact match first. It gives it first priority. So if you're bidding on bone broth recipes as an exact match, it will use your bid for that exact match keyword above using it for broad match. So if none of that makes sense to you, then just go through the rest of the training, or just kind of, do your best. Just get started. Like, do your best to make up some exact match phrases, and once the traffic starts running, you'll understand more.